In 2020, Democrats took full control of Washington.
And it will give Democrats control of the Senate.
Joe Biden has been elected.
But Republicans stood up in the states.
There was no blue wave. Democratic down-ballot disasters carried all the way to the state legislatures.
Now, we're the last line of defense against the Democrats' socialist agenda. The ways we're fighting back are bigger than you think. Thanks for joining episode 6 of It's Bigger Than You Think, a conversation about the politics that most impact your daily lives. I'm your host, Annie Moore, and joining me today is California Representative Young Kim. She actually flipped her district seat from blue to red this past November, which is super exciting, working on taking back the House in 2022. So Representative, thank you so much for joining us. Let's go ahead and get right into it.
I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yes, absolutely. So you started your career as a public servant in California's General Assembly in 2014, before running for Congress in 2018 and then flipping your district red in 2020. What made you want to run for office in the first place?
Well, as you may know, I worked for former Congressman Ed Royce for over 2 decades. That was since the early 1990s when he was still in the state Senate office. During that time, I really enjoy working in the community that I love. This is where I raised my 4 children. And my husband actually was the one who was more politically active. He was the one who ran for Cerritos City Council, where we initially lived. And he was running an advocacy organization. So what I know today, I thought he gave me a very beginning, first start in politics. I never thought I would be the one to run for office, but for the first time I thought about running was actually when my husband brought up the idea. He thought, oh gosh, you have a great personality, you'll be good in political office. And I thought, gosh, I don't know what that means. But, so I continued to start working with Ed Royce in state Senate office, and I continued to work with him in his congressional office when he won the first time in 1992. Then right after we had lost a state assembly seat in 2012, that was for the first time in Orange County history where it was considered the most red county in California. My former boss, Ed Royce, brought up the idea that he told me we should look for someone to run for that assembly seat. And I told him, oh, sure, boss, I'll get going on that right away. And he said, well, look no farther. You know the district well. I think you'll be a great candidate. Well, that's how I decided to run for state assembly. And, I'm an immigrant. And as an Asian American, giving back to my community is deeply embedded in who we are. I'm very, very thankful to be able to serve my community in this elected position.
So what were some of the most rewarding experiences that you had when you were in the General Assembly?
With my election to that seat, a state assembly seat in 65th district, I helped to break the 2/3 supermajority held by the Democrats. That meant I became an instant target by the left who wanted to take back seat, which has become a very swing district. So being able to get things done was not easy in a super minority status at the time, but I was able to stop the Democrats from automatically raising taxes and stop them from introducing constitutional amendments and bring some common sense in Sacramento. I spent time building relationship with my Democratic colleagues, and despite being in the minority, I was able to navigate the legislative process to bring tangible results for my district. I was able to, help secure more funding to address the homeless issue, especially with the youth homelessness in Orange County. At the time I was elected, I found there were nearly 30% of the nation's homelessness youth living in California. So this work was very important for me. Important because, I was able to do this thinking about my 4 children. So it was very, very special.
Wow, that's awesome. So do you think that your time in the state legislature helped set you up to run for Congress?
Absolutely. First of all, running against well-funded incumbent and successfully winning that seat definitely gave me the confidence to run for Congress later on. I also think being able to get things done as a Republican in that Democrat-controlled state legislature taught me how to build relationships that was so needed to get things done here in Washington. Working in a bipartisan way, working across the aisle is something that I learned while I was in the state assembly. And I first decided to run for Congress in 2018 when Congressman Ed Royce, my former boss, announced his retirement. As you know, California is a jungle primary where only top 2 candidates advance to the general election. And since it was an open seat at the time, we had 17 candidates running. But I came out as the top vote getter in the primary, although I narrowly lost that seat in November of 2018. But despite that heartbreaking loss, I rebounded and ran again in 2020, and here I am.
Thank goodness you did.
Yes.
So what do you tell other women that are thinking about running for office?
Go for it. I mean, if you don't win the first time, that's not the end of it. Try again. Go for it again. Winners don't quit. Quitters don't win.
Yeah,
I think women do better, being a multitaskers. Just thinking about.
That's true. So true. In 2020, you were one of GOP congressional flips in California. Why do you think there was such a backlash against Democrats in states where they have total control, like in California?
I won in a district where Joe Biden won by almost 11 points. And so I'm very thankful that we persevered. People were fed up. We've seen California policies and high taxes drive workers and businesses out of the state. That's why we're losing a congressional seat now. And that's why the state has more than 1.7 million signatures to recall Governor Gavin Newsom. Republicans want to help, get people back to work and get our economy back on track. And we've also seen in Congress, Democrats promoting some of California's policies at the national level. For example, the PRO Act, that would nationalize California's failed AB 5 legislation. That killed jobs, hurt workers, and drove businesses out of the state. This is why Californians pushed back against the Democrats. And President Biden, if you heard his joint address to Congress, he mentioned it over and over as a top priority for him to pass that bill. That would be a big mistake. If Democrats continue to head in that direction, I think it bodes well for Republicans in 2022. And I believe the GOP, to me, is grand opportunity party, not grand old party, that creates pro-growth policies to help all Americans to succeed. And I think the American people see that. So we will have a great opportunity to take back more seats in 2022.
Well, you went ahead and answered my next question. I was going to say, what do you think all of the Democrat, super big tax increases, spending policy that's coming out of Washington, how do you think that specifically is going to affect 2022 for the Republican Party?
Well, people are fed up. Again, HR 1, PRO Act, all of these legislation that the Democrats are pushing through, passing legislation without the input of the Republicans through the reconciliation process. People are seeing it now. And this is going to only help Republicans mobilize, unify, and be more dedicated more than ever to get the seats back in 2022. So I'm very optimistic.
Yes, absolutely. I hope you're right. So you were one of 3 of the first Korean American women elected to Congress this past year. What does that mean for you personally?
I'm honored and grateful to be able to add my voice to the national conversation as one of the first Korean American women to serve in Congress. For an immigrant from South Korea to come here, put myself through college, have a career, and start a small business and raise a family. I told you I have 4 wonderful children. They're all grown up. We all serve the community together now. And this is a community I called home for decades in Congress. So to me, this shows the American dream is alive and it's really real. And I know while I'm one of the first women to serve in Congress as a Korean American Republican woman, I know I won't be the last. I hope my story can inspire others, and especially other Asian Americans, women and girls, to pursue their dream just like I did.
You mentioned that you immigrated here from South Korea. How does that shape your view of immigration policy as a whole?
I immigrated with my family as a young girl in pursuit of that American dream. We had a very humble beginning, not speaking a word of English, but happy because what little we had was still more than what we had when I was growing up in South Korea. That's why my family and I worked hard, appreciating the opportunity that was provided to us to live the American dream. America benefits from legal immigration. And that's why an important issue for me is fixing our broken immigration system. And I'm glad that I can add my unique perspective as an immigrant to that important conversation at the national level.
What do you think about what's going on down at our southern border right now?
I visited the southern border in California, and also I went down to the southern, border in Texas, in McAllen area. And that's clear. What we are seeing, we are in the midst of a security, humanitarian, and public health crisis. As an immigrant and mother of four, it broke my heart to speak with mothers who made that long journey to the United States with their young children, oftentimes, walking and, thousands and thousands of miles from Northern Triangle countries like Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador. Many of them also, I found them coming from Venezuela. This is the result of the Biden administration's recent policy changes to rescind previous administration policies without replacement. And they're only hurting Americans, hurting legal immigrants, and hurting these migrants. I believe a mutually beneficial and humane approach would be to have these asylum claims addressed and processed in their home countries, like the Migrant Protection Protocol legislation, better known as the Remain in Mexico policy, called for. And that way, if migrants' claims are approved, they can come here safely and legally. It also would help lower the amount of migrants coming here and straining our resources on the ground. So we must come together where past Congresses have failed to secure our border and allow for fair and legal, compassionate immigration reform. So I'll do my part, and I urge the Biden administration to come to the table, do the same.
So as we're talking, more policy-related questions, what do you think about the recent jobs report, and why do you think the recovery of our economy is stalling?
The most recent jobs report was obviously disappointing, but not all that surprising after the recent policies implemented by the Biden administration. Increasing taxes and piling on more regulations will only hurt our economy, from recovering. As ranking member of the Small Business Subcommittee on Innovation, Entrepreneurship, and Workforce Development, I am focused on pro-growth policies to cut the red tape, get people back to work, and grow our economy.
What do you think of the spending packages and tax hikes proposed by your Democratic colleagues?
Throwing money at problems will not create long-term solutions. And we've seen that with many of my Democrats' spending packages and tax hikes. As I said, as the economy is trying to recover from prolonged shutdowns, especially in the state of California, where I'm coming from, during the pandemic, there have been over 40,000 businesses closing, and over 20,000, almost half of them have closed their businesses permanently. And so increasing taxes and piling on more regulations will only hurt our recovery. We have to get people back to work and create pro-growth policies to support workers and businesses.
What scares you the most about the Democrats' agenda, and how do you think that's going to impact the future of our country?
Oh, what scares me the most is when I think about how the radical agenda we've seen pushed by the Democrats is driving up our national debt, raising taxes for middle-class families, hurting workers and businesses, jeopardizing our security, and hurting America on the world stage. This has been a hard year for everyone due to COVID-19 pandemic. And we need to empower individuals to get back to work and work to safely reopen our communities so we can get back to normal. Throwing money at problems won't fix them. We need practical solutions that support American workers, businesses, and families.
So on the flip side of that, what's a policy area that makes you most hopeful for the future of the Republican Party?
I think Republicans work to empower people to pursue their dream, gives me hope for the future. I always say we are the grand opportunity party. And I think the fact that so many women, minorities, veterans won this past cycle as Republicans is proof of that. We have plugging in for my freshman class, we have the most diverse, most smart, hardworking freshman class that is adding to our growing Republican conference. Our conference is focused on pro-growth policies to help Americans of all backgrounds to succeed, just like I did. We support law enforcement to keep our communities safe. We support STEM education to keep exploring America's footing in the frontiers. And we keep showing up to different communities to share our message. That's how we'll continue to grow our base and succeed into the future.
Incredible. Grand opportunity party. I love that. Do you have any final thoughts for our listeners today?
I want to thank you so much, Annie, for having me, and for all of our listeners. We are only a few seats away from taking back the House in the House of Representatives. Our goal is to do everything we can to represent all of you. Not for me, it's the 39th congressional district is very important, but we'll be focused on all returning as incumbents and just bring few of us along the way. That's how we grow our party and get our message across and show that GOP is truly the grand opportunity party. And let's all work together, be focused, motivated, united, and determined to win back the House in 2022.
Representative, thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate hearing your thoughts and learning more about your story. And thank you to everybody who's listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the pod on whatever platform you're listening on. And always remember, politics have implications that are bigger than you think.